Everyone, welcome to Aerospace Live. My name is Bob Roberts. I'm an Aerospace Education Officer with the United States Air Force Auxiliary Civil Air Patrol. Our channel is devoted to helping you to engage with the aviation and space community, as well as helping you with virtual hands-on lessons and pilot knowledge instruction. Our guest for this week has been flying since the age of 14. He's a graduate of the Aviation Science from Western Michigan University as a CFI, and he's had a career as well in the cargo industry as a freight dog. Now, Alex has two books that he has written. His first book was called Hauling Checks, and his second book was called CFI ! The CFI book. I do recommend these books. They are both really funny ways of looking at aviation. And we'll have the links to these books down in the show notes, and I hope you check them out. So now let's go ahead and let's welcome Alex. Alex, how you doing?
Good. How you doing?
Man, I can't complain. Did you have a good Thanksgiving?
Yeah, did. How about you?
I fell asleep like everybody else from that turkey comatose, I think they call it, right? So,
yeah.
Thankfully the eggnog has not started flowing yet. So, but other than that, no damage was done. So, so Alex, we're going to jump right into it because I know you're a busy guy, but you started flying at a pretty early age of 14. So what made you decide to go into flying at such an early age?
My grandpa was a fighter pilot in World War II. He was in the Polish RAF, part of the British Royal Air Force. So my uncle was also a pilot briefly. He became a CFI, but didn't really follow through with it further than that. As he said, he had kids at that point, and he needed a job he can actually support a family with. And being a CFI wasn't going to do it. So I had it in the family, so it was kind of something I was wanted to do. I started when I was young. I went to Culver Military Academy in Indiana, and that's where I learned to fly there. Soloed, I think 2 days after my 16th birthday, and got my private shortly after that. Went to Western Michigan, as you said, and then became a CFI after that, and then flew freight.
So now Western Michigan, so the Aviation Science degree, is that a flying degree, or is that more of like a technical degree?
Yeah, it's a flying degree.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that was a Part 141 school then?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it was.
So now what made you decide to go Part 141? So a lot of the folks that will listen to this, they're kind of in that younger age group, right? So we have kind of our younger group between the ages of 14 and 18, and then everybody else is usually between the ages of 26 and 102. So a lot of our younger folks, they have that question, right? Part 61 versus Part 141. You're not somebody who runs a school or anything like that, and it's been a little while for you. But was there any thought in your mind about Part 61 versus 141? And why you went
it can
to
definitely be a cheaper way to get you to the same spot, really. When I did it, I wanted to have a college degree. And at that time, it seemed like it was going to be important to have that. I think at one time, the airlines really wanted you to have a college degree. But it seems like these days, it's not really that important anymore. I had coworkers that I flew with when I flew freight that didn't, and they went that route. Just getting the instruction, the certificates, not going through college. And really, I think their careers could take the same path. It doesn't seem to make much difference. So, yeah, I can't really discourage anybody from going that route.
Yeah, going the 141 route.
Yeah, going either way, really.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's up to you what you want to do, and if getting a college degree is important, maybe then you want to go the 141 route. But if that's not as important, then going Part 61 would probably be just fine.
Okay, cool. Yeah, so for folks that are listening to this and they don't know, so well, you've got it. You're my guest. Can you do a quick explanation of Part 61 versus 141, what that actually means? If not, I can do it.
It's been a while now, so I don't know how good my explanation is going to be. Yeah, you might want to explain that one.
Yeah, no worries. So Part 61 is more like if you drive to your local airport and you see a sign on the side of the road that says, "Learn to fly here." They operate under a specific set of guidelines from the FAA. They tend to be more general aviation oriented. There's not really, there may be some folks that are looking at airlines and a career in aviation, but most of the folks are going to be people like you, or not maybe like, no, not you, because you actually went on. There'll be more people that are just more interested in, just taking the family to Disney World on the weekends and things of that nature. They're not looking to get into a big 737 later in their life. As opposed to a Part 141 school, they are more of a professional school. So like you went to Western Michigan University, folks are probably used to hearing about Emory-Riddle, and there's a lot of other schools that are Part 141s, and a lot in that you can get your college degree plus you can get your pilot's license, usually your instrument rating, your commercial, and then they'll get you your CFI typically, and then you can usually jump right into a CFI position and try to start building up those hours for your airline gig. So now, did you get your CFI at Western Michigan University?
No, I went to, what's it called? ATP in Sacramento, California. I did like the accelerated course. I got up through commercial at Western, and then got all the CFI certificates through ATP afterwards.
Okay. Now, was your goal at the time to fly commercial, to get into the big iron, or?
Yeah, it was. That was always the ultimate goal. And yeah, I kind of changed my mind on that when I found out more so what it was really like in the regionals and everything like that. And went the direction of cargo, and I was really enjoying that, and probably would have stuck with cargo had the recession not happened when it happened.
Right.
And other things in my life that were happening at the time that I decided to kind of change paths. So
yeah, cargo. Yeah, it seems like cargo seems to be like a stepping stone. It almost seems like there is a choice. Some folks will go to CFI, they'll build up to say 500 hours, give or take. That seems to be a good number of hours, and then start applying to some of the cargo positions. Now, when you flew cargo, was that what you saw as well? Was it, about that 500-ish hours, or were people needing really more hours than that?
Yeah. So at the time, I got hired with probably just a little over 1,000 hours at AirNet, which is who I flew for, and probably right around 1,100. And then so I had to do a SIC program till I got to about 1,500 hours, I think it was, and then they turned you loose after that point, which I think was pretty close to what the regionals were hiring at the time. And I think that's changed somewhat over the years. So I don't know if those numbers are current, but with cargo, we were operating under Part 135, which is a little different than Part 121 as far as the minimum requirements and everything required for.
Now, you mentioned earlier, I want to kind of go back to it. So you mentioned, there was kind of that diverging paths, right? So in one way you could go cargo, you could go CFI for a while, right? Build up hours there. But you can go cargo, and then the other way you can go regional, right? Once you had enough hours.
Yeah.
And you had decided that, looking at regional really wasn't the way for you to go. And so you decided to go to cargo. For a lot of the listeners that are, kind of in that same ballpark as you were back then, what kind of led you to cargo over being a regional pilot?
The pay at the time. The pay at the regionals was significantly lower than it was in cargo at the time. At least the starting pay was. Yeah. So that was the main decision.
Now, were you thinking about at the time, possibly jumping from cargo over to regionals, or were you going to try, or at the time were you thinking you were just going to stay in cargo and work your way up inside cargo?
Yeah, I think at that point I wasn't really sure. I think I was still I was open to kind of anything. Yeah, or either going to like a fractional or something like that too. I was pretty much open to whatever opportunity came. I wasn't really zeroed in on one specific path. Yeah.
Now, cargo, they tend to operate more out of a single base, right? So as opposed to a regional, which may have you hopping around from city to city and sleeping in lounges, nonstop. Was that the case with you when you were flying cargo? Were you kind of flying out of the same place?
We had multiple bases. Our main hub was in Columbus, Ohio, but we had multiple bases with not as many pilots in each base, but there was actually probably 30 bases or so
Well,
throughout the country. But some of them maybe only had one person based there, two people, in one base. Some had quite a few more than that. Um, so I guess not as many big hubs. We just really had one hub, which was Columbus. The rest of the bases were, just a couple pilots here, a couple pilots there, scattered around.
now
So
I want to go into your books. So now I kind of Alex and I were talking a little bit before we started the recording of the stream. Now his first book was Hauling Checks. Now I read these in backwards order, so I ended up reading CFI the book first, and then Hauling Checks. But you can do these books do stand apart from each other. So if you're going to just buy one, you can buy either one. You don't have to read one to understand the other one, which is nice. I will say, so I started off with CFI, and I'll tell the listeners, you scared the hell out of me. So I didn't catch on at the beginning that is where it says right here, a satirical look at aviation comedy. I thought he was relaying real stories, and he's talking about the engine being on fire and air traffic control being like, well, all right, well, we're not going to worry about it if you're not worried about it. And so, so I wanted to ask you, a lot of pilots have hangar talks, right? So they have their hangar stories, right? So their buddy will have a big story about something that happened in aviation. As pilots, we all have our stories. All right. And then the pilot next to you always seems to have to one up them. Where did these stories come from? Are you just a delusional individual who just comes up with this stuff on his own, or
no, I'm really not as good at making stuff up as it might seem. I mean, they really are all based somewhat on a true story. A lot of them are bits and pieces of things that are kind of thrown together into one event, which makes that event seem crazier than it probably was in real life, but the individual elements of it were true. Some of them are things that actually happened to me. Some of them are things that happened to other pilots that I knew. Some are just stories that I heard, I heard this CFI out here, had this happen to him thing. And I exaggerated, quite a bit in spots and dramatized things in quite a bit in spots, but they really are all, loosely based on factual stories.
I don't know if I find that funny or if I find that horrifying.
It's both. It's not, I guess it's, a lot of it wouldn't be funny. The true stories aren't funny. They are more horrifying. But the goal was to put it in a, to present them in a funny way, which makes it a little less scary and makes it kind of, brings the point across that sometimes these things happen out there. And if you can kind of laugh your way through it, it's not quite as scary as it would be if they were just, presented maybe exactly the way that happened and things like that.
Yeah, so I know the one story, or it was a collection of stories, and I have to know if this is based off of a real person. If that person ever listens to this and they find out who they are, we both apologize to them. But you had a gentleman, and honestly, folks, if you like aviation, I recommend you get this book, because especially if you're a CFI, because there's one gentleman in here that's referenced in the book. His name is George. So is George based off of a real person?
Yeah, George is 100% a real person. Yeah, and George wasn't his real name, but George was based off of a student when I started instructing at a flight school that was the first student I was given, and I was basically told that this guy's flown with every other instructor. Nobody else can seem to do anything with him. Here's your turn to give it a try.
Yeah.
And that was my first day, was going with this guy, and yeah, a lot of what's in there is pretty true about him. I mean, he was a nice guy. I hate to talk bad about him. He was a nice guy. He really loved aviation. He really wanted to be a pilot, but I don't think he was all quite there, and maybe not capable of really pulling it off. But yeah, he kept trying though, and I flew with him for a little while, and then another instructor got hired behind me, and he got passed on to that instructor, and it kept going for a while until a lot of instructors brought it up of the point of, should we really be flying with this guy? Should we really be allowing this to continue? And the owner of the flight school wanted it to continue because it was a
Revenue.
customer.
Yeah, it's revenue. So
It's revenue. And the guy wanted to do it, and nothing really ever happened with him. Maybe quite as dangerous as some of the things I depict in the book. I embellished it somewhat, but a lot of the stuff I put in there, him being lost, flying right over the top of the airport, saying I don't see it yet. As I'm looking down out the window, as we pass right over the top of it, that's 100% true. A lot of stuff like that. So he never did really solo though, and I don't want to spoil anything from the book.
Yeah. No. I want folks to read the book to get it.
Yeah, say too much about that, but
yeah,
in real life, the guy never did solo. He eventually did give up on it.
Well, I think what we should do, anybody listening to this, everybody send me like $2. We're gonna go send George an iPad with ForeFlight on it. So this way, this way he can figure out where he's going. But I really did enjoy that story about George from the book, and honestly, that story alone is worth this book. I really did enjoy that, and and then going to your second book, which it's actually your first book, second book I read, but your first book being Hauling Checks. I was scared about the maintenance. And I have heard that from other pilots. I'm friends with a lot of pilots. I talk to a lot of pilots. And so they say that, when you get onto the airlines, right, they make everything shiny and polished. And when you're flying cargo, that thing's got to get from point A to point B. It doesn't have to look pretty. We had Kerry McCullough on last week. I don't know if you know who Kerry is. He's a pilot that Discovery, I think the channel is Dangerous Flights. He's one of the ferry pilots from that show. He was on last week. It was one of the things that him and I were talking about. He was talking about the condition of some of these airplanes. Were pretty bad. You duct tape and bubble gum them together. So did you find that as well? I know you might be a little more hesitant to say, if people are listening, but did you have? How was the airplanes? Were they just some people say like they're really well maintained, they're just not pretty, but the airplane itself is good.
I flew for AirNet, and AirNet was probably the best of the check haulers. So the planes we flew, they weren't new, they weren't pretty at all. They looked pretty. My mom saw the inside of one of the planes once and was like, "Oh my God, I can't believe you're flying this thing." But we did have really good maintenance, and they things broke on a regular basis. They were 40-year-old airplanes, and they were used pretty heavily. So things broke, but maintenance always took it seriously and got stuff fixed when it did break. So, we had pretty good faith in what we were flying, but we worked with a lot of other check haulers, like on routes. We, our company, gave some routes out to other companies that we'd meet up with pilots from other companies here and there, smaller companies. And I'm not going to mention any of the names of those companies, even though I think at this point, all of them are out of business. But some of those people that you felt so sorry for them for what they were flying and the lack of maintenance that they got. I would meet up with people on routes that like had stuff that was broken for like a month, and they couldn't get it fixed, and they were basically being told, if you want this fixed, you need to ferry the plane halfway across the country on your day off, and then we'll fix it for you, and then you can ferry it back, that was on Saturday, and then you can ferry it back on Sunday. If you want to sacrifice your weekend, we'll get your plane fixed for you. But if you're not willing to sacrifice your weekend, then just live with what you got, basically. And, a lot of them I met up with one guy on a regular basis. He was based somewhere other than where his family lived. He used the weekend, that was his 2 days a week, to go see his wife and kids. He didn't want to give that up to go, fly the plane somewhere to get it fixed. So he got used to just living with stuff, that got crazier and crazier over time. And the stuff he'd tell me about, like, I mean, he was flying an MU-2, out of the left seat, IFR using the instruments out of the right seat for months. I mean, that stuff was really happening out there, and that didn't personally happen to me, but
Mhm.
I met people that happened to.
Yeah,
So
I can't say who this was, obviously, because in case the FAA ever listens to this, but yeah, there was a guy that his ILS didn't work at all in the airplane, and it didn't work for like 4 months, and he flew every approach using ForeFlight.
yeah,
I was like, oh my gosh, I didn't want to hear about that. I was like, I'm like, did you at least have a standby battery, in case your battery in your iPad failed?
uh-huh.
But yeah, that was the story he told me, was,
Yeah,
very similar to what you said. And that's crazy, right? Again, that shows you the difference between the oversight, the FAA will do on a civilian airplane that's flying passengers versus maybe cargo. So,
yeah, yeah. There definitely seemed to be very little oversight in it, and it seemed like it was really up to the individual company on what they wanted their reputation to be as far as how they did that. And there were some that cared, and there were some that didn't care.
mhm. Now,
So,
for the folks that don't know, and I read the book, so I know, but so what is check hauling? Like, what is that? What is that?
it doesn't exist anymore. As far as I've heard, 2015 was the last time any checks were flown. But prior to that, if you wrote a check for your mortgage or your car payment and it was deposited at the bank that, whoever you sent it to, that bank needed to return the check to your bank before they actually get the money. So they would fly the checks back overnight. If the deposits came in, they would get cashed when the bank closed at 5 p.m. They'd load them all up, take them to the airport, fly them overnight so that they'd be at the bank that the money was coming from by 9 a.m. the next morning.
Wow. So that is actually,
And then they would set the money.
yeah. So that is totally different than the way the world seems to work now with everything digital.
Yeah, I mean, now you can cash a check on your cell phone without it ever being sent anywhere. But yeah, I mean, just, I started doing it in 2005. And at that point, that was still the way it was completely done. And some of the checks that we flew were like extremely high value. I mean, pretty much all the time, what we had on board was at millions worth at least, of total checks added up. Some of them, most of them maybe small values, but some that we had were really high value stuff. And it was not even like get it there by the next morning. It was like, how many minutes is it going to take to move this check from one bank to another
Oh,
check, or from one bank to another bank? Because the time when it was in between was like called float time. And in the float time, nobody was getting interest on that check. So when one bank had the money, and it was being transferred to another bank, they wanted to make that transfer happen as fast as possible. So the bank receiving the money was paying for the flight so that they could get it to themselves quickly. And
wow.
that's the way it worked for years and years. And I was there, I started in 2005. The year I started was the year that Check 21 was passed, which started or legalized electronic check transfer. And that was right at the point when it started to kind of go away. And I was there from basically it being, full blown, all checks were flown, to by the time I left in 2012, there was hardly anything left at that point. We just kind of saw the business dwindle away over those 7 years.
So you guys were the original Amazon Prime delivery company.
Yeah, we actually did deliver for Amazon for a while too. That was one of the things when the checks were going away. The company was trying to bring in other types of business to replace the checks, and flying for Amazon was one of the things that we did for a short period of time. But it didn't really work out with them for other reasons. But
Yeah, so that was pretty interesting. Some of the stories here. So again, for the folks that are watching the YouTube video, that's this book here, The Hauling Checks. And for those of you that are listening on the podcast, the book is called Hauling Checks by Alex Stone, and again, the other book is called CFI, the book by Alex Stone. Now, Alex, what got you interested in writing these books?
Well, I wrote hauling checks first. I was still working at AirNet at the time, and I was like out to dinner with it was my girlfriend at the time, but my wife now, telling her stories about things that I had flown through and everything. And she said, "You should write a book about this." And so I went home that night and started writing the book, and I wrote it in 3 weeks. Once I started, I kind of became obsessed with writing it, and didn't stop writing until I finished it. At the time, I was reading a lot because, when you're flying for an airline, there's a lot of downtime, sitting at airports and hotels, everything like that. I had a lot of time to read, so I was kind of interested in the idea of writing a book because of that.
Now these were the first books you wrote. So if anybody's out there now, most of the people listening to this are going to be people interested in aviation. But if somebody was out there and they wanted to write a book, how did you go about get started? I mean, did you just write the book and then you had to look for a publisher? Like how did that whole process work for you?
Yeah, I just wrote the book, and when I wrote it, I honestly thought that no one was ever going to read it because I wasn't a writer. I still sometimes don't think of myself as an author because I don't really have a background in that. I went to school to be a pilot. I don't think I did that good in English class in high school. When I told my family that first wrote a book, they were like shocked by it, kind of surprised. I think it was the last thing they expected me to do. But I just wrote it just because I thought I had something good to say, and I got it done. And I had, a few people close to me, like my sister, my wife, read it, and they're telling me, "This is great. You got to do something with this." So I self-published it, and honestly, even when I did it, I just thought like it's just going to be cool to have this book in my hand that I wrote and say I wrote this book. I didn't think anybody was going to buy it. And then I put it on sale on Amazon, and I posted it in a few aviation forums, and it started selling right away. So, I mean, I think in the first month it sold 100 copies, which, I mean, most books don't sell 50 copies. I think like 95% of books that are published never sell more than 50 copies. So, right off the bat, it was like, wow, people are actually reading it. So, I went back almost right away and improved it because I felt like, oh, I can do better than what I had, and went back and kept working on it, and actually within a couple months after republished it again, basically an improved version of what I had initially published, and yeah, that was it. And I started writing CFI right afterwards, and I only got a little ways into writing it though. I was only maybe had a couple chapters. I had maybe 10 pages of notes and ideas for it. And then kind of got sidetracked on something else and put it aside. And it just kind of, sat on the shelf for about 10 years. And in 2018, I was approached by a director in Hollywood about buying the movie rights for Hauling Checks, and that ended up falling through. That actually did happen twice. I had interest in that, but both times it fell through. But I hadn't read the book and set at Hauling Checks in several years at the time when he that guy contacted me about that. So I read it again and was like, wow, this is really good. And then I was like, hey, I started that other book. I never really finished it. I need to pull that up and see what I had. And I went back and read what I had and thought, wow, this is really good too. I've got to finish this, and started working on it right away then, and finished writing CFI. So basically finished writing it 10 years after I started writing it, and then published it, I think January 2019. So.
So if you ever do get the movie going for Hauling Checks, can you do me a favor? Can I be? There's a character you have in here called the Co.
Yeah.
Can you put? I'm 6'8", almost 300 pounds, and so I think I would look fantastic on the big screen.
Sure, you can be the Co.
Can I be the Co? Can you give him my name?
yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
I think I would do a great job with that character.
I have this hope that one day, one of those two books or both are going to fall in the right hands with somebody who can actually make it happen. I think the last guy that had it, he was a director, and he loved it. He really wanted to do it. He had some serious connections with a a producer for funding for it, but he made another movie that he was working on at the time when he first contacted me, and it ended up being a total flop.
Hmm.
And I think that he lost his opportunity to do anything else after that.
Yeah, so I guess if George Lucas, if you're listening to this, we know that you're not heavily involved with Star Wars. We don't think you're on the set of Mandalorian every day. So
Yeah.
if you're looking for a new hobby to go with American Graffiti, you can do a hauling checks, and then you can make me the co.
Yeah.
And then we'll get Alex on set as the principal writer and production designer. So
I will say, since you asked about George and you're talking about the Co is not a real character.
oh, I'm so disappointed.
But he didn't exist in real life as he does in the book. But pieces of the Co did come from other people that I kind of pieced together a lot of things to make the Co's character. But I think if anybody reads that and thinks the Co was real, that would be probably the most terrifying thing in both of those books.
Every time I hear an airplane above my head, I'm going to be looking up going, oh my gosh, is that airplane being flown by the Co?
Yeah.
So actually, when you were talking, I didn't even notice this originally, but so these books are actually produced by Amazon. So you don't have to make some big deal with a big publishing company and order 10,000 books. You can.
No, you really don't anymore.
Cool.
Self-publishing is actually a real thing, and there's actually a lot of real big authors that are self-published now. And the thing with it is, if you make a deal with a big publisher, you're signing away most of the rights to that book when you do it, and what you actually get per copy sold is pretty little. It's pennies. And with self-publishing, what I get is a lot more. And you retain 100% of the rights to it. And at this point, brick and mortar bookstores are kind of a thing of the past. I think 20 years ago, self-publishing probably wouldn't have gotten many people to read your book.
Right.
And it was really difficult to get book at a brick and mortar store. And I did look into that when I first published Hauling Checks, because at that time there were still some out there, but there's less and less now. But ultimately I kind of just gave up on doing it because it was too much trouble, and online book sales are where it's at now. And you can basically get it anywhere you want, self-publishing. So, I sell more copies for Kindle than anything else, and audiobooks too. So it's really the digital formats are the biggest now, even over paperbacks.
Yeah, the cool thing too about the self-publishing is, when you're going, and I don't know anything about this business really, but just from my, just from talking with authors like yourself and some of the lower, beginner authors and some of the people that are more established, some people that have had, the bigger book deals with the Barnes and Nobles and stuff like that. They say the same thing you say. And and a lot of them wish that they had the self-publishing back then, because what happens because the publishers are taking a risk, right? To be able to say, okay, is this book going to sell for $20 a piece, or is it going to be in the bargain bin, for $5 a piece, within a month? And they don't know. And if you're a newbie, everything I tell my folks that work with me all the time, you got to be willing to be bad before you're good. Right. So you're never good at something day one. Right. And so the self-publishing, it allows you to build your fan base. Right.
Yeah, that's true.
I mean, I don't know we've never talked before. I've never met you before. I just came across your book on Amazon. I was searching for different aviation books, and I saw your book. And I said, it looks interesting. And over time that'll snowball, So you do that, and
it does snowball, and it really has snowballed far bigger than I ever imagined it would. I mean, both books have really been, way more successful than I ever imagined. I mean, like I said earlier, when I first wrote Hauling Checks, I really never thought anybody was going to read it. And even when I first put it on sale, I thought, well, yeah, maybe I'll get lucky and a few copies will sell. But I mean, they've both been really successful. And since I released the second book, CFI, it's picked up sales to where Hauling Checks has actually sold more in like the last year than it did in the 10 years prior.
Mm-hmm.
because when you add another book on it, it really increases your visibility, and CFI became real popular right off the bat, and it increased, the sales for hauling checks, and they've kind of both carried each other. It's done well. So,
Yeah, that's what happened with me too. Like I said, I found your CFI book first,
hmm
and then because of this book, I went ahead and I bought this book. So just like you said, the one can lead to the other. So,
yeah,
um,
I think hauling checks. It's kind of, especially now since it's a dead industry. It's a little more of an obscure sector of the aviation industry that probably not many people at this point even realize that it used to exist.
mhm.
Uh, but CFI, everybody that's a pilot has been involved in flight instruction, either as a student or as a CFI themselves. So um, I think it's captured more eyes than hauling checks did. Yeah.
Now, okay. So one question before we wrap up. So you go into your CFI book and you talk about all these different students. So now you had your initial pilot's license at one point, your private pilot, and now you learn how to speak English, Bob. I'm going. Did you? Somebody probably just thinks I had a stroke on air. So did you get your private pilots at Western Michigan, or did you have it before you went to Western Michigan?
I got the private at Western.
At
Yeah.
Western.
I had soloed before, but I got my private at Western. Yeah.
Okay. So your CFI either before when you get your solo, I imagine a Part 61, or your when you went to Western Michigan for your Part 141. So now if your CFIs were going to write a book about you, right,
hmm
and they weren't going to call you Alex Stone because they didn't want to embarrass you in real life, they were going to call you Timmy. And so
Uh-huh.
if they had a character named Timmy, would they have any good stories? What would be a good story that they would have about Timmy?
Ah, you
Anything you
know,
did to scare them?
I know I had some moments for sure. I don't know if they'd have anything as good as George though. But yeah, I definitely had some moments as a student. I think especially first starting IFR training. I bet you can remember what that was like the
Oh yeah.
first time you put the hood on and we're all over the place, which that's in the book there. Um, and I think we've all had some bad landings in our day.
Oh yeah.
But I don't know that I could think of a specific one. So long ago now, but
Yeah.
I'm sure they come up with one. But
Yeah. Get
I'm not better than everybody else. But
get them a drink. They'll talk about Timmy.
and
So,
yeah, and I think with the people I wrote about in my book, I put this in the introduction of the book.
mm,
Most of the students I had when I was an instructor were great students that I love flying with, but there were bad ones. And when I wrote the book, it's for entertainment really more than anything else. And writing about, oh, this student did great, that's not real, a very interesting book.
no.
Right, picking out the bad ones and writing about that is a little more entertaining. So, um, I kind the book is really about like the 1%
Mm.
of the bad ones that are out there, and
So now,
kind of highlight that.
so for the listeners that are here that are thinking about getting their CFI, and then maybe we can wrap up with this. So for the folks that already have their private pilot's license, and maybe they're going to get their commercial, and they have thoughts of, being a weekend warrior style CFI, right? Not a professional looking to build hours for the airlines.
Mhm.
What would be your recommendations? Like, what words of wisdom would you have for those folks that are looking to be a CFI?
Um, keep your hands close to the controls. I don't know. Maybe. Uh, are you saying as far as like schooling or what type of?
Yeah, just after all your experience as being a CFI with the different students you've had, is there something that you wish that somebody had told you about before you became a CFI and started working with students that maybe in retrospect, now and maybe you'd like to share?
Hmm. Yeah, that's a good question. It requires a lot of patience. Um, it requires a lot of patience, and it requires a lot more teaching skills than I think you realize, maybe because prior to going into it, you're learning to be a pilot yourself and everything all the way up to the point of getting your CFI. And really, the getting the CFI certificate, it doesn't take that long, and it's just a small portion of what you do as a whole leading up to that point. And you know, it requires a different skill than just being a pilot requires. And there's maybe not enough of that in the training prior to that on how to teach somebody, you know. So maybe focusing more on that area prior to doing it would be something that I would recommend. That I think I had to learn a lot of that myself on the job as I was doing it. You know, I know how to do this, but how do I show somebody else how to do this?
Yeah, and transitioning from the left seat to the right seat probably is a little challenging in the beginning too. It's a
Yeah.
different dynamic. All right, very good. Well, Alex, I think we'll wrap it up there. And I wanted to thank you again. Congratulations on the new book, CFI the book. And do you have any plans on writing any more, or did you enjoy the process?
Yeah, I do. I actually, you know, I started on a third book, but it's not real far along, and I've got young kids now, so I don't have a lot of time right now to write. But one day I will finish it. But it's not an aviation related book, so it has to do with something else. I think I kind of covered what I had to cover with in aviation in those two books. So yeah, the next one's going to be about something else probably, but it'll someday, maybe in another 10 years.
Okay. Well, I do know that for the folks that are listening and aren't watching, behind Alex, he has a big top tent. And so now that you say you have children, I feel better about the fact that
Yeah.
your wife hasn't made you sleep in the big top tent, you know, because you did something bad or
Yeah,
something.
yeah, it's the IKEA tent back there. Yeah.
So, all right. Well, Alex, thanks so much for your time. We really appreciate it. I wish you good luck in these two books. I really did enjoy reading these books. They are easy reads. These are not Stephen King novels that are going to take you 100 hours to enjoy. And so you said you have an audiobook too? I didn't notice the audiobook.
Yeah, there's an audiobook version of both of them, and the guy that narrated them, he did an awesome job. He did CFI first, and then he did hauling checks a few months afterwards, and he did such a great job with the characters. And you know, even if you read the book, even to me, listening to the audiobook is almost like a new experience, even though I wrote it, because he did such a good job bringing the characters to life. Yeah, so I recommend him.
All right. Well, I know,
Yeah.
like most people, I think I have 8 credits out there that I haven't used because I have like a library of audiobooks that I haven't even listened to yet. So I keep getting a new credit every month. So I think I will actually go out and especially this one here, because I want to see how a good audio book of George is going to come across.
Yeah, I think you'll like it. Yeah, you'll enjoy it.
Okay, very good. Well, Alex, I think we are going to wrap up there, and I want to thank you for all your time. And anything else before we go?
I think that's it. Thanks a lot for having me on. I really appreciate the opportunity, and yeah, hopefully people out there learned a little bit from it. And yeah, thanks a lot.
All right. Thanks so much, Alex. We'll talk to you later then. Have a good day.
All right, talk to you later.
Bye.
Bye.
Okay, and that was our time with Alex Stone, again, the author of CFI, the book, and his older book, which I still highly recommend, Hauling Checks. Feel free to go grab those. And actually, to be honest with you, I have not listened to the audiobook. I am actually going to grab CFI, the audiobook, because he has some incredible characters in this one here. And I really want to see how they're going to be brought to life. I'm really, really interested in that. All right. So with that, I think we're going to wrap it up. One quick thing. If you wanted to reach out to us on Twitter, we have Aerospace_live. You can reach me there. Our YouTube channel is kind of where most of our material lives if you're listening to us on podcast. And that's at youtube.com/my name. So youtube.com/Robert Roberts. And then on podcast, you can find us at Aerospace-live. So Twitter, it's _live, and podcast, it's -live. And again, if you are interested at all in Civil Air Patrol, we do a lot of work with cadets, Aerospace Education, which is my area, and emergency services. If you're interested in learning more, please visit gocivilairpatrol.com. Thanks, everybody. Have a great day. Hey, I hope you've enjoyed that video. If you did, please do me a favor, hit that like button, hit the subscribe button if you want to see more content. Up here on the left-hand side, you're going to see another video from our this playlist. And if you click down here, you're going to see another video on our channel. Hope you guys all have a great day. We'll see you soon. Bye-bye.